Hi, welcome to Closed Loop Homestead. I'm Keith Mitchell. I'm a master butcher, and we've started this YouTube channel with the process in mind of not just butchering animals, but also what the closed loop is that there's no waste from the animals. We don't want to put anything in the waste stream. We want to be able to utilize everything. We are out here helping some fellow homesteaders. We harvested these lambs yesterday, saved the hides and the heads for some other projects. We'll be saving things today as we go through the cuts of meat. We'll be saving things like bones for soup bones, tallow for soap, and some of those different things. So let's get into it. All right, so a little bit about what we've got going on here. We're set up, ready to process. We've got cutting mats down, so we're not cutting directly on the counter. We have set up some buckets for various things. We've got the trash bucket, trim. This is for our tallow and fat. A little bit about the tools we've got out here. A set of steels to kind of keep your knife sharp. A hook, which is optional but nice to have. And then a couple boning knives. I like one that's a narrow boning knife that's been sharpened a few times to get into the smaller places around the neck and things like that. And then just a regular 6-inch boning knife. This bottle here has got 50% water and 50% vinegar. This is something that we use as we clean up the carcass and as we're cutting. This is in a meat shop, an inspected shop. This is considered an intervention spray. It actually kills E. coli, and you're going to have some of that transfer as you're doing a farm slaughter. You're going to get some dirt and pieces on your carcass, and so as you trim and wipe down, you want to have this available to kind of keep food safety. I've been in the meat business for a long time, and there's lots of different ways to process lambs, process meat, and you're always learning different tricks and that as we go. But this is kind of one way of doing it. This is kind of how we do it mostly in a shop, where we're just kind of doing some custom cutting. One of the advantages to processing your own meat at home that I like is you can cut to how your family eats. For example, if we're doing a lamb and your family doesn't eat a lot of roast, we're going to process this so there's not as many roasts, there's more chops and maybe ground lamb or stew meat available for you. So there's ways to process it that you get higher yield, but if you're not going to eat it that way, it doesn't really matter. So we're going to start with this lamb as a whole lamb. There's a couple places you can start. I like to start down here. And this is the flank. I just kind of like to take this flank meat and come up to the last ribs here. And just kind of open this up to where we're right to those last ribs. And then just follow this last rib bone right here down. You can feel it underneath the meat there. And that is great for trim. So we'll place it in the trim and just kind of make sure that there's nothing on there that you don't want to have. Trim. I'm going to put this cutting board behind me here. I'm cutting onto the cutting board. And then we're just going to do the same on this other side. So just come right down in here. You can see that seam here. fat will have a, we'll put in with the fat meat, the towel. Alrighty. So we have kidneys right here. We're going to remove those out of the animal. They are left in during harvest. And the main reason for that is there's this layer of kidney fat around them. And this is your tenderloins on it, like a beef or lamb. And so that kidney fat protects those from drying out too much while they're aging. That's the main reason why you want to leave those on there. The next place to start is we're going to start with the hind leg here. So if you can feel, you can see where this kind of comes to a point here. This is the sirloin muscle. This is the what would be the round on a beef. We're going to take and cut right through here. So you can kind of feel the, you can see the indentation, but you can also feel the end of that sirloin bone. So you're going to cut down until you feel the bone of the backbone, and we're going to follow that all the way around. You can use the weight of the animal. You can use the hand meat saws, or you can use a reciprocating saw. You want to just go through the bone. You don't want to cut through meat with the meat saw. So as soon as you feel you're through the bone and you feel that give, then just finish it off with a knife. So that's one primal or main cut. The next section that we'll kind of look at here is the rib front section. So inside here, we start at the very top and we cut back 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and a half. So right in here. You're going to make a mark with your knife. I'll actually do it on this side first because of the way this is facing me. So again, this rib here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and a half. It should be about where the end of this brisket is. I just lost my count. Right same on this side. Okay, we're going to come through the meat on the backbone, down to the backbone, and bring it all the way around. Through that. And then the next place we want to go is this last rib bone. We're going to go right along it. And do the same here. I'll just come through that. And you can kind of use the edge of the, go through this joint if you want. Sometimes faster, just use the meat saw. So we'll just go through that with the saw real quick. Alrighty, so this is kind of some basic big chunks. So this is the front section, the shoulders. On a beef, this would be considered a chuck. This is the hind quarter section. This is the rib section. And on lambs, this is considered the saddle. But this is where, on a beef, your New York steaks and T-bone steaks would come from. So let's start breaking these pieces down into cuts that we're more familiar with and recognize. I'll trim a little bit of this fat off here. So on a beef, this would be your skirt steaks. And that's, this diaphragm holds the lung and some of those muscles inside the animal. if we want rib chops from the animal, what we're looking for, a couple things. We're going to have to split it down the backbone. And we're also going to make a cut here. So what we're looking for is some landmarks. If you look at this end, you can see this triangle. Where that triangle is, if you come down about 2 finger widths apart from it, you can make a cut there, or you can make smaller chops and come here. I like to come just below that triangle and make a mark with my knife. And then on the other side, you have the same thing. So if you come just below the triangle, make a mark with your knife, and then take those 2 marks and just line them up. And then your meat saw. Then you have lamb ribs. We're going to kind of come down this rib bone, this side here, and we're going to cut this side off because we're going to do something a little different on this side. Can I get another set of hands right there? Thanks. What about when your saw doesn't want to cut? Bone dust off. So this would be like your ribeye if you were doing beef. There's this section of bone right here that you can see kind of these knobs underneath there where the rib bone connects to the spine bone. That comes off if you're doing bone-in chops. For this, they wanted, that might be okay. So we'll go ahead and remove this chine bone. You can do this with a hand meat saw. If you don't have a meat saw at all, you just would want to do these boneless. and kind of come along. So what you're doing is, if you kind of look at this here, see where that rib bone kind of comes up and has that knob on the end? You're going to cut through those knobs and remove this little triangle piece of meat, of rib. What you don't want to do is cut into the loin or the eye of the meat at all. Not far enough back. So you can see there's still rib bone here. I wouldn't be able to cut through these rib sections with that rib bone there. So we're going to come a little further back. So this bone, you want to put in your stock pot. That makes great soup bones because there's a lot of cartilage in there. These, right here, just kind of wipe the bone dust off. Right here you can see these feather bones. So we're going to come in here with our knife. This one's not quite cut well, but we're going to come just right along those feather bones. And you're going to flex your knife around the bones and come on this other side just a little bit, because I didn't catch all the bone there with the saw. So we're going to come just underneath on this side. But right along those feather bones, you want to stay right along that. You can feel the bones with your knife. Try to break those off there. Okay. Now you have this fat on the rib. And I like to take this piece off. This is just a cap. You take it off all the time on beef. And I like to remove it on lamb. Some people like to leave it on. But there's plenty of fat underneath it, in between, for nice chops. Need a little bit of meat in there. Just trim it out. And that goes in. I don't know which bucket's which here. Trim bucket. This is our fat bucket. And then you have, this will run the entire backbone of the whole lamb. Is this yellow tendony stuff. I don't think it's good for anything. You want to make sure it's not on your meat. It turns to a rubber band really easy. So to do boning lamb chops on the ribs without a saw, you have to go along each of these bones. The part that catches most people up is the bones don't just stay straight in between, right? They kind of curve this way as they go down. So the trick to that is you want to kind of square this end off, make sure you're straight there. But then the top of that rib bone and the bottom of the next rib bone, place your knife there and just go straight down. And then the same here again. And straight down. We have one kind of skinny one that you can choose to keep with them. I like to keep it with them, just mark it as one skinny one. But that's those rib chops from that section. So they're ready to be wrapped. Set them right up here. Show you real quick what we're going to do with the ribs. So the ribs, I like to remove this meat, this flank meat. Go right along the bones. This goes in our grind pile. You can see the top of these bones here. There's actually, this is cartilage up in here, some feather bones. You can just cut right through them with your knife. And then come right here. And I like to square this piece up. Again, some good burger piece. This piece I keep with the soup bones or soup meat. Kind of clean this side up if you want. Clean some of that fat off of there. So it's not super heavy. Throw our fat, look at that one. Come under this roast meat here. Then you have just some nice little lamb ribs. In this case, they are ram ribs. But that membrane there, you want to take it off before you cook it. Just kind of get under there with a knife or your hook and just pull this off. Trash, and then you have a little bit more membrane up here. Just kind of get under there again. And there is some ribs and chops. So this is the other side of the ribs. We removed the chine bone already off camera, but you can do the same thing, get the same kind of rib chops. We're going to do something a little fancier on here. We're going to do kind of the tomahawk style rib chops. So we're going to come clear down in here on the ribs. For those that like to barbecue and have that kind of stuff going. Again, we'll just cut through the ribs with our meat saw. Through that one. Out through that one. Again, those will be saved for lamb ribs. What you'll want to do different on this is you're going to come and pull this fat piece off, this cap off. So that's the same, just a little bit longer. And again, plastic or knife. And we've got this piece. This is probably a good point to kind of talk about this too. The purpose of the steels, this is a porcelain one, so it's a little bit, not really coarser, but the smooth steel just kind of brings that edge back as you're cutting. You'll use your steels often. And just so when you think about it, a knife edge is like this, right? And most people think when the knife goes dull that it's like this. But what's really happened is it's rolled over like this. We're starting to roll this way. That wire edge that starts to roll over, these steels straighten it back out for you. And so you just want to go along the steel about the angle you sharpen at, whatever angle that is. Alright. So on this now, where that triangle ends, we're going to go right to the edge of that triangle on both sides. There it is, right in. Basically almost where this rib ends. You can see kind of this seam. That's what you're going to follow along. We're going to take all that meat off right there. And then we're going to do what's called Frenching these. which is a fancy way of exposing the bone. And kind of square this up. That goes into grind. We're going to come down that point, come across, and down on each of our rib bones. Now, they look kind of ugly right now. So if you continue to just French these bones and clean them up, like this, across this whole thing you would have a lamb rack, or rack of lamb. We're going to leave them kind of a little messy right now. And we're going to go ahead and do the same trick. Come in here and go over to the top of this bone, touching that next bone over. And we're essentially going to make lamb tomahawk steaks. A little bit of bone in there to try to get around. Get between that cartilage. There we go. Small one on this side. And all we're going to do is kind of come in and clean these up. We're going to come, so just angle your knife down towards the bone and do the same here, and then kind of just come on the back side and again stretch. Little one. That one's for the kiddos. Or you can just trim that off and throw it in the ground. That's how we really get this one. Same step on the ribs, just come up underneath those other bones. You can see them right there. Just kind of feeling that, make sure there's no bone in there. I like to take this rose meat off a little bit. Some of that fat underneath there. Pull that. Oh. Okay. So this is the saddle piece. You can see normally if you split down this backbone right along this line, you can actually see the line that you would follow on your saw. And then you would, if we were in like a regular meat shop, we'd run this down the bandsaw, down the middle, turn it over and start cutting little T-bone and porterhouse type chops for the beef. But here we've got this meat, the hand meat saw. It's pretty difficult to get through the type of rib bones that are here. I'll show you as we go through this. So we're going to pull the tenderloins out. So what you want to do is just take the tip of your knife, and this is called a pistol grip. Remember, your knife is just part of what you're using. It's a tool, so don't be afraid to move it around different ways. And just kind of start going along the bone. And follow right along there. You can see, and then these bones kind of swoop down. So we're going to follow that bone and just basically scrape right along it with our knife. And that is a lamb tenderloin. We're going to leave them whole. Just wrap them together like that. Then like nice little medallion steaks when they're all cooked up. A piece of fat here we're going to take out. Again, right along here.
So since you're doing questions, I wanted to ask.
Yeah.
So you just threw something into the trash.
Right.
And it was fat. How come that fat cannot be used for tallow?
It has, so anywhere, it's a good question. Anywhere there's a large deposit of fat, there's usually glands.
Okay.
And so there's a gland inside there, and so I just don't use them for tallow because it kind of renders out, but it's just, it's there. And glands are what they are. You know, they're filters for the body, so I like to remove them as much as possible.
Thanks.
So you can see where this would be difficult with the hand saw to come through these more flat bones to make a T-bone type style. So we're going to flip it over, go along this backbone just to kind of make our mark. And then you can kind of see the top of that bone there. That's what we're going to follow with our knife. Again, just until you feel those rib bones underneath it there. And just kind of let your knife work around the bones. And scrape along there. And these would be on a beef. I like to relate everything back to beef. All animals are kind of put together the same way. And so if you relate everything back to beef, for me, that's my reference point. That's what I've cut most of my life is beef. So we're going to come just below this lip here and actually cut some of this trim off. Trim some of that off.
So does that become stew meat or something? Or is
Yeah,
that
this can be stew meat. This is actually pretty fatty, but you can. So we'll probably grind this and make it into sausage, because that's what we want to do with the grind is sausage. But this actually, in some places they'll cure this, kind of like a bacon, and then roll that like that, and then just kind of cut it into little slices. And again, we're going to kind of trim. I can see some of that, some dirt and stuff that got left over there. We're just going to take it off with the knife real quick. Throw that part away. Grind the rest of it. And the reason for that is so we have a more manageable piece here as we go along under these rib bones. So I want to start underneath. They end about here. You can feel the end of them. So if you kind of come under the edge of them with your knife, you can kind of start staying pretty close with them. Just gonna come along here. And again, just using your knife and riding along the bone as close as possible.
Now what cut is this?
So this will be some chops, loin chops, not rib chops. So there is a difference. This would be on a beef. This would be your New York steak.
Okay.
We're just going to kind of come right along that. And if you look similar here, piece of fat will there. You can see that heavy fat cap on there again. You want to trim. You don't peel this fat cap off. You want to just trim some of this outer fat down with just the top of your knife.
Now do you cut that into steaks or leave it whole?
This will get cut into steaks. You could leave it whole if you wanted to do, if people liked a lot of roast more than steaks, they would be putting this whole. Okay. So to judge these kind of where you cut them, there's two ways to cut steaks up. There's just cut straight across. And so what I do is I lay my hand kind of there, and that's about an inch. So if I kind of put that on the end and there, and then just cut it across, I've got about an inch steak. The other option is you can butterfly them, where you come over about a 1/2 inch, cut partway through, come over another 1/2 inch and partway through. And that allows them to lay open and make a nice looking chop. If you're a big deer hunter, this is the part of the back strap. So there's those. And we're just going to do the same thing on this other side.
So what were these called? Chops?
Yeah, those are rib chops. And if you want, you can kind of clean this bone up a little bit more. This is something that I know in a meat shop, I would make my guys clean this up a little bit more. Go kind of between that. But when we're doing bone broth, if you're going to do bone broth, you want to leave some more meat on there. Makes a little bit of broth. So. Again, we're going to clean this tail up a little bit. Take this piece of fat out there. There's usually a gland in that fat we don't want. Okay. Get into our other stuff.
Should I do 2 or 3 lamb chops per wrapping?
Or all of them in one?
I kind of like to do,
Pardon?
I like to do 3 or 4 depending on the size of the family. Thing I like about lamb is I don't know why in the US it's not as widely used, but it's just like one of those perfect sized animals for a family. It's manageable that you could slaughter a lamb, use it up in a month or so, and then have another lamb for a larger family. And I think a lot of places, the other thing that's interesting about lamb for me is it's a very rich meat. It has some rich flavor. And so even though it's smaller steaks, a good lamb chop is just as filling as sometimes as a beef steak.
Right.
Turn that one up. What's kind of cool with this lamb here, you don't see this in a lot of lambs, so, but you can actually see some intermuscular fat, some marbling, that you generally don't see in a lot of lambs.
What was this? Say that again.
So if you look here, you can see some of that intermuscular fat, some
Right.
marbling.
Uh-huh.
You generally don't see that in other lambs.
Why is that?
A lot of times the lambs are fed so much grass
Uh-huh.
that they don't get a chance to build up a nice intermuscular fat. And that's what
Commercial lambs.
Australian lambs are always grass, and so you don't see it as much.
So is this because we grained them for a while?
Mhm.
Or? Okay.
So, well, we had a little camera break.
Yes. We're gonna do those. Yes.
I removed the neck, and again, most people are going to grind this as a bone it out, get all this little meat of neck meat off, and clean it up for grind. But I have been taught by a friend of mine about doing these on the smoker or in a slow cooker as a neck roast, and they are fabulous. So we pretty much leave it on the bone this way. The only thing we want to do is, you can see that yellow fat stuff we talked about earlier, tendony stuff. The old butchers that I learned from when I started cutting meat, we called it a patty whack, and it's really not much good for anything. I had one co-worker from Colombia that used to say that you can cook them and eat them, but I don't know if he was serious or not, because he used to teach me Spanish, and then I'd ask another co-worker what that word in Spanish meant, and he'd say, don't say those words, they're bad words. So I don't know if he was serious about the cooking and eating this, or just trying to see if I would try it. But again, just kind of remove that. It goes quite deep on this one end, but you kind of work that out of there, because you don't want that in your roast. And that goes in the trash bucket. So that's the neck roast. This piece here, shoulder blades, and there are some roast up here. On a beef, this would, like I say, be considered the chuck, and this would be the chuck end. This would be where the chuck roasts are at. So we'll pull those out as a roast. But if you look on this end, it looks very much like the rib chops. That's because we separated that away from one rib. So that's literally the only separation between rib and chuck is one rib difference. And so if you ever see this on a beef, if you see the chuck end of a chuck roast that has that on there, you can buy it and actually cut some steaks out of there and have kind of a poor man's ribeye steak. Alrighty, so we're going to remove the shoulder and the front shanks. So there's a couple ways to go about doing that. You can come all the way up here, remove this shank meat, and come under here and remove the shoulder blade. Do a shoulder roast that way. We're going to take the shank off here. We're going to cut up in here first and just take this piece off. Take that off. Should be okay for bone broth. Now we're going to come where this elbow joint is. Come into the meat and just come into the leg bone. Through that bone, take that off. Then you have lamb shanks. They're very popular in a lot of dishes, Mediterranean dishes. You'll see lamb shanks in your dishes. Just gonna clean a little bit of this fat off of here. So if you wanted to, again, you could cut these into sections all the way up and have some shoulder chops. They're not my favorite because they tend to be a little bit tougher, and if you don't braise them or cook them right, they're not very good. And a lot of times if people see chops on the package, they just assume cook it like any other pork chop, lamb chop. So we're going to actually take some meat off of here and a couple roast. So the trick to this is under here is a seam, and all you have to do is just go along that seam and open this up. Comes clear out under the shoulder blade here. Get my knife under the shoulder blade. Okay. So now you have shoulder blade muscle under here. Under on this side, you've actually got the shoulder blade bone, the scapula bone. And it starts right about here. So you got a little bit of leg bone here, scapula bone, and then the rest of the roast.
Now what is this?
That is a rib chop, a tomahawk style.
A tomahawk rib chop. Okay.
So what I'm going to do with this is we're going to leave these as shoulder bone-in roast. So I'm just kind of cleaning up some of this fat and stuff. Again, right in here, we'll clean this fat up. That can go in for grind. So on a beef, you'll actually remove along this ridge of the shoulder blade scapula. And this side is where your flat irons are, and this is where your chuck tender is, or mock tender. You can actually see kind of where that shoulder blade attaches in. I come under here, just kind of clean that up. You can see in that fat, there's a gland. You can see that gland, again, a big deposit of fat. That's where that gland's hiding at. Just come out. And what we're going to do is we're going to come in about here. We're going to make 2 smaller shoulder roasts. So I just kind of make a line with my knife. Then you come in with your meat saw. Once you're through the bone, just finish the cut with your knife. And there's one little roast. And there's another. Do the same on this side. You just kind of open it up so you can see that seam. And what we like to do is use as we come along that seam, the weight of the animal will help kind of keep it open for you.
And these are just lamb rib chops, right?
Lamb ribs. kind of find a point where you want to separate those through. Take that heavy fat out. Just trim that up so it looks pretty. And clean up the rest of this meat and get some roast off of here. We're going to start with either side. This piece here is where the brisket is on the lamb. It's not very thick, so we don't really save it for a brisket. There's two kind of layers of meat here. There's this shoulder meat or underblade meat. And we're going to take this off, just kind of come through into the ribs. And we're going to start working this back on this seam. And this is excellent stew meat. So we're just going to use our hook here and kind of trim all this off of there. So over here. Trim some of this ugly off. That bloodshot stuff. And again, you just put this in the trim pile for now until you're ready to make stew meat. Where this kind of rib ends, you can kind of see this seam through here. Just take that and just start bringing roast off of there. They do have neck bones you're going to go around here, so kind of just work it around those neck bones. And then you're going to have the spinal bone here. And you can see that yellow fat that ran through. And that makes a good pot roast, boneless pot roast. Let's pull this yellow fat out on this side. That paddywhack. And we're just going to come clean this off the rib bones here. Right along them. You don't have any dirt stuff or anything.
So these are just lamb ribs, right?
Yeah. You can see a big gland right there. So I'll just kind of work it out.
I should put 2025. It's almost.
Almost there, right? That's got the gland in it. And then this just goes in our trim. Or stew meat or ground meat or whatever you're going to do with it. So on this side. Come on here.
Okay.
Get all this trimmed up off of there.
Hey Keith, what is this?
That's a shoulder roast too. Again, come in here on that line. Just kind of work along those rib bones. Work it down. grind.
And what is this?
Shoulder.
You have 3 shoulders?
You'll have 4.
How do, oh, what, how?
2, and then they're cut in half.
Oh, okay,
So this was
okay,
where they were together.
okay, all right.
I just kind of come in here and clean this meat up in between for grinding.
The intercostal.
Yeah, this is just that in between the rib. There's not a ton of meat on them, but
That's
what
what
it's
it's
saving
becomes
anyway.
for.
just grinding. Yeah. Take as much meat off as we can. Anything behind. For some bone broth. Try to clean as much off of that. Alrighty. Now the last section.
I do have to say, though, we need to get those other 2 done before too long,
Yeah.
because I want them still to be lambs, and one of those is mine. And remember,
We'll get them hopefully like next week sometime.
okay, remember, you can have some meat.
Okay.
He's like, yeah.
So there is
Says, where's mine?
a bone right here. I'll share with you. Just kind of split this pelvic bone with the. Then I like to clean some of this fat out around here. Just so I can kind of see this. Spine there. We're going to kind of split this down the backbone here. So right in here this is the tailbone. So I like to clean up right in here where the bung went through the meat.
And this is.
Tenderloins.
Okay.
Give me the vinegar water real quick. Just kind of give everything kind of a quick spray. Some vinegar water up in there. So what we're going to do is clean up some of this fat and glands here in the back. Around along kind of this muscle here. Take the red meat off. That part away. And so one of the things, even with the stuff that's going in the trim bucket, you can feed those scraps to your chickens. They love them, so then they're not wasted. Waste meat. So what we're going to do, you can see this little hip bone here. We're going to come around with the tip of our knife and just follow that hip bone around. And up. This is called the H bone. This is the sirloin. And we really could take it off here. But you can also just kind of take through here and separate this leg bone. And then you're going to come right here where the sirloin ends. And that meat is. Just kind of come around again. This bone kind of comes in and back out again on the top here. And there is a little tendon right there to hit. So I like to kind of trim it up a little bit.
This is the neck.
The neck. I like to take this tendon off right here. So if you just come straight down to the bone, take it off. It's great for cartilagey stuff for soup. Bones. And that leg. Done.
Yes, my dad called sister and me, his brats. And he'll tell Rick, give his brat a hug or give his brat a spanking.
So now we're gonna come in and take the sirloin out. So if you come right along the edge of this bone, and separate this. This is a little piece of tenderloin actually. It gets on the end part. There for stew. Then this bone follows back up around here. And again, you're going to just start with the tip of your knife and just kind of push that in. One of the things you'll notice too is these knives flex. You want to have some flex to them so you can kind of really get in there along that bone. And then this bone comes up, and then we'll come finish off right along here. Trim. We're just going to kind of clean up the fat cover here.
Please tell me I spelled that right. Here.
So kind of square this up. A whole lot of meat on this end. Now beef, this is where your sirloin steaks would be. So we're just going to cut them into little chops here.
are, what are
Shanks.
Shanks.
Yep.
Why don't you do one at a time? And is it considered a steak or what is it?
Just a lamb shank. Yeah.
SHANK?
Yep. Go through this one with the saw here and separate this sirloin off from the.
These are glands as well.
Yeah, you can see that gland right there in there. I'll just come in and do the same thing around this bone.
So that's the connected side of the scapula?
So this is the hind
Okay. So this is a pelvic.
part of that pelvis bone. So these were the two
Right.
part of the legs that we're facing.
And you're just getting down to where you can break the joint out.
Yeah, and then there's just this little bone that we're just kind of following along here, getting all this as close as we can. And we're just gonna come in.
So your glove, is that steel or is that like a Kevlar?
This one's more kind of like a Kevlar mesh,
Cut proof?
wire mesh, yeah. I've got a steel one too, but it's a little more uncomfortable to wear lately. There's your other leg of lamb. Yeah. Come in here and do.
So is this the back end of the,
Yeah, this is the tailbone right here.
okay.
And this is the sirloin portion. We're just going around that bone. Scraping wire along it.
So what are these?
Those are chuck roast, neck roast. Or not neck, but like front shoulder.
But they're called chuck roast, right?
Chuck roast, yep.
They're supposed to, but yeah.
So if you look at this little cap piece here, that's where the picanha is on a beef. Just cut these into some sirloin chops. And that's that. If you look inside here, we got about a half a bucket of trim. So if we want to do some stew meat, just pull out a few good pieces like this. You can stew up, and then just come over about an inch. So we'll kind of square that piece off. And there's some stew meat. All right, so that concludes the basic breakdown of the lamb. We have other videos where we'll talk about some different cuts of lamb. But just to kind of go over everything again real quick, we have some stew meat. We have the trim that will be ground for burger, sausage, or some stew meat. The bones will all be cooked down for bone broth. After they're made into bone broth, you can toss these to your chickens as well. They'll clean up everything. And then they can be kind of powdered and pulverized for fertilizer. The tallow will be rendered down. This fat will be rendered down, probably used for soap making. It also works for some other grease, and we'll be doing a video on all of this stuff as well. The scraps, the stuff that's no good, actually just toss it to your chickens. They need the extra protein, and they will clean it up for you. So thanks for joining us. Keep an eye out for future videos and content, and we'll see you next time.